4 years ago, nobody had Morocco in their bracket. They were ranked outside the top 20, given almost no chance by the bookmakers, and dropped into a group most experts expected them to exit early from. Instead, they beat Belgium, knocked out Spain on penalties, stunned Portugal in the quarterfinals, and became the first African nation in history to reach a World Cup semifinal. Now, at the 2026 World Cup, with 48 teams spread across the United States, Canada, and Mexico, everyone is asking the same question. Who's going to do it again? We went through every mid-tier and lower-tier squad in this tournament, looked at their defensive shape, their counter-attacking patterns, and their squad depth, and narrowed it down to the 3 teams most capable of pulling off a genuine Morocco-style run to the semifinals. Before we get into the teams, it helps to understand why Morocco's run actually worked, because it gives us the formula to look for. Across 7 matches in 2022, Morocco conceded just 1 goal, and that was an own goal. Their back line sat deep, stayed compact, and refused to be stretched no matter who they were facing. In possession, they didn't try to dominate the ball. They invited pressure, absorbed it, and then exploded forward in transition with pace and direct running through the channels. That's the template, a defense that frustrates bigger, more talented teams into mistakes, combined with a front line that only needs a handful of clean transitions per game to make it count. Every team on our list fits some version of that mold. There's also a structural reason to expect more upsets in 2026 than usual. With 48 teams instead of 32, there's now an extra knockout round before the round of 16, and several groups are stacked in ways that look almost designed to cause chaos. A defensively sound team that grinds out a third-place finish in a brutal group can suddenly find itself with a much more favorable run through the bracket than a so-called favorite that finished second in an easier group. In other words, this format rewards exactly the kind of low-event, hard-to-beat football that Morocco played in 2022, and that gives our 3 picks an even better shot than they might have had in a more traditional tournament structure. Yes, Morocco again, and it's not just nostalgia. The Atlas Lions return with almost the entire spine of their 2022 squad still in place, except this time every one of those players has already proven they can handle the pressure of a deep tournament run. Achraf Hakimi remains the focal point of everything they do. He can defend as part of a back 3-1 moment and sprint the length of the pitch to finish a counterattack the next. Behind him, the same defensive structure that shut out Belgium, Spain, and Portugal in 2022 is still largely intact, now with 4 more years of chemistry between the center-backs and the midfield screen in front of them. What makes Morocco dangerous isn't star power up front, it's organization. They don't need to control a match for 90 minutes. They need 10 good minutes of transition football, and Hakimi or one of the wide forwards can turn that into a goal. If they manage their group stage carefully and avoid an early collision with one of the true heavyweights, there's no obvious reason they can't go just as deep as they did last time. The biggest risk to Morocco isn't tactical, it's physical. Extra time in multiple knockout rounds in a row tested their squad depth in 2022, and with an even longer tournament this time, fatigue could be the thing that finally catches up to them. If you're looking for the most quietly effective team in this entire tournament, it's Ecuador, and that's exactly why they belong on this list. La Tricolor have built their whole identity around a defensive midfield and backline that reads like a Champions League starting 11. Moises Caicedo sits in front of the defense and breaks up attacks before they even develop. In front of him, Willian Pacho and Piero Hincapié, both regular starters at major European clubs, form a backline that simply does not panic under pressure, even against elite forwards. Ecuador landed in a group with Ivory Coast, Germany, and Curaçao, which looks dangerous on paper, but it's also a group where Ecuador's defensive discipline could end up being the deciding factor in tight, low-scoring matches. Their attack isn't flashy. Veteran striker Iner Valencia provides experience and know-how up front, while younger players like Kendry Paredes offer occasional flashes of creativity, but Ecuador doesn't need to outscore anyone to win. They need to make games ugly, keep the scoreline close, and strike once on the counter when the opponent overcommits. That's a Morocco-style game plan in almost every sense, and in a 48-team format where surviving rounds matters more than highlight reel football, low event, defensively elite teams like Ecuador have more lives than ever before. Japan might be the single most underrated team at this entire World Cup, and almost nobody outside hardcore football circles is talking about them. In the months leading into the tournament, Japan beat Brazil, Ghana, Bolivia, Scotland, England, and Iceland, a run of results that frankly should have turned a lot more heads than it did. Their only defeat in that stretch came against the United States, and even their last goal conceded came in a match they were still winning, a 3-2 victory over Brazil. What makes Japan so dangerous is structure rather than star power. The Samurai Blue play as one of the most cohesive defensive units in international football, built on disciplined pressing triggers and players who know their roles down to the second. Liverpool midfielder Wataru Endo might not be a household name to casual fans, but he's exactly the kind of holding midfielder who makes a defense function as one organism instead of 11 individuals. Their group, featuring the Netherlands, Sweden, and Tunisia, is genuinely tough, but Japan has a long history of overperforming in the group stage and then causing chaos in the round of 16. If they get through, their pressing intensity and counterattacking speed could trouble any team that underestimates them, which, based on how little attention they're getting, is most teams. A few teams came close to making our top 3 and deserve a quick mention. Norway, back at the World Cup for the first time in nearly 30 years, absolutely dominated their qualifying group and could carry that momentum into a surprise run, though their style leans more toward overwhelming weaker opposition than the patient, defensive counterattacking approach we're focused on here. Colombia has the individual quality, led by James Rodriguez, to beat almost anyone on a given night, but their defensive consistency remains the bigger question mark for a long tournament run. And Ivory Coast, fresh off Africa Cup of Nations success and carrying real pace on the break, could absolutely play spoiler against a team like Germany or Ecuador, even if a full run to the semifinals feels like a stretch too far. So here's our final call. Out of every underdog and dark horse at this World Cup, Morocco, Ecuador, and Japan offer the clearest combination of defensive rigidity, tactical discipline, and counterattacking efficiency, the exact recipe that carried Morocco to the semifinals in 2022. Morocco brings experience, continuity, and Hakimi's individual brilliance. Ecuador brings arguably the best individual defensive talent of any so-called underdog in the entire tournament. And Japan brings red-hot form, total cohesion, and a track record of wrecking bigger teams' tournaments when nobody's watching. One of these 3 could be the team standing in the semifinals when everything else falls apart, and if history has taught us anything about World Cups, it's that betting against the quiet, well-organized underdog is almost always a mistake. Which of these 3 teams do you think has the best shot at a genuine Morocco moment this summer? Drop your pick in the comments, and if you want more World Cup breakdowns as the tournament unfolds, make sure you're subscribed, because the surprises are just getting started.